Welcome back to TK Tennis. So today I want to talk about why tennis racket manufacturers are designing, manufacturing, and marketing their rackets wrong. At least in my opinion, sort of my wish list, the perfect wish list of how I wish companies were manufacturing their rackets to the public in probably a more beneficial manner to tennis players. And I'll do that as I'm stringing this racket, and just a little update on some string reviews I have coming up. So I'm stringing with Polytour Pro, and strangely enough, I've really used Yonex strings very little. I think I used Polytour Pro maybe 4 or 5 years ago, but I can't even remember if I did or not. So I haven't used Polytour Pro. So I want to thank Juicy for the buy me a string. He bought me a set of Polytour Strike right here, and I'll put it up on the screen. So he bought a set of Polytour Strike that he wanted me to review, and since I haven't done a review on Polytour Pro, I figured I'll do that one first, and then I'll get to Polytour Strike afterwards, and we'll see how it goes. So this is obviously sort of the baseline, the most popular string that Yonex makes, so I figured I'll test this one first, and then I'll move to Polytour Strike. And again, if you're someone who wants to help my string reviews, you don't have to buy me a whole set of string. Even if you just want to donate or contribute to the Buy Me a String program using the Buy Me a Coffee link that I'll have in the video, even if it's $2, $3, $5, whatever you contribute helps. I obviously don't make any money on these string reviews, and I don't get the strings for free. I purchase them. Sometimes a manufacturer will send me a set of strings, like Rattlesnake or Diadem in the past has sent me some strings as well. But most of the time I'm purchasing them on my own. So let's get to why I think racket manufacturers are designing, producing, and marketing their rackets wrong. And there may be some good reasons for that, and I'll talk about that towards the end on what my opinions are and why they're probably doing it. But I'll get to that in the end. So anyway, when it comes to racket manufacturing and designing rackets, there are already so many variables, and I think racket manufacturers focus on the wrong things. We all know the weights of the racket. You hear the common standard rackets like 300 grams, and then there are rackets that are 315 grams and so forth. And this goes to my other videos talking about why you're doing your racket journey wrong, where I talk about swing weight a lot. And it sort of goes along the same lines. And I've thought about this topic a lot, and I just really don't like the way racket manufacturers produce their rackets and their models and how confusing it all can be. And I think it could be a little bit more straightforward. So anyway, going to the weight. So you may go out and demo a racket, or you know you like 300 gram rackets, and that's sort of the number that a lot of people know about. But, you know, everyone can, a static weight is carry weight. Your 80-year-old grandmother can carry a 300 gram racket. But can she swing a 300 gram racket well is a whole different story, because now you're not talking about its weight in terms of static weight. You're talking about swing weight. So can your 80-year-old grandmother carry a 300 gram racket? Of course she can. But can she swing a 300 gram racket that has a swing weight of 325 or 330 effectively? And the answer to that is probably not. Your 80-year-old grandmother probably wants a swing weight of, let's say, 300, which is very different than 300 static weight, kilograms squared centimeters. So that goes to how racket manufacturers are designing their rackets. And I think there's a problem there. So let's take this Gravity right here, and this is our Gravity MPL. What I would like to see in the perfect world of racket manufacturers doing is you have a model, and this is the Head Gravity, and this one is the Head Gravity MPL. And then right here we have a Head Speed Team, and then here we have a Pure Drive, Babolat Pure Drive. But anyway, so I think the better way to do it is, you can take, let's say, a Wilson blade, and Wilson blade comes in a 98, and it comes in all different weights, 300 gram versions, 315 gram versions, in a 98, in a 100, in all these different variants. And of course, with different string patterns, sometimes 16 by 19, sometimes 18 by 20, and so forth. But they also have, in many cases, different beam thicknesses, which means it's a different mold. So you have a racket that's actually a different mold. So you could have a Wilson blade that's a light version versus a Wilson blade that's a heavy version, and it's a totally different mold in terms of beam thickness and even, other attributes of it. And that's why I think that's a problem. If this is a head gravity or a Wilson blade or whatever it might be, my idea is pretty simple. I think you should have a head gravity, and not a head gravity pro, and not a head gravity MPL, not a head gravity MP, not a head gravity team. And when it comes to Wilson blades, I don't want to see all those variants. So you have a mold for a particular racket. So you have a mold for a head gravity mold. And maybe that mold is a mold for a 98 square inch racket or a 100 square inch racket. But other than that, the rest of the mold is the same. The head shape is generally the same. The beam thickness is the same, and so forth. And as I tie this knot, so that's what I would like to see in terms of the mold. If you have a head gravity, I want to see a certain head shape, which makes it unique, and that's what makes the gravity unique. But I don't want to see different beam thicknesses depending on if the racket is lighter or heavier than a different one, which is basically a different mold. So if you have to change the beam or you have to change the head shape, you have to change the mold. But if you're changing the string pattern, you're not changing the mold. String pattern is just how you drill the holes in the racket. So you're not changing the mold in that case. So my idea would be, this is a head gravity. And a head gravity always has that same beam width, racket head shape, but it might have a different string pattern. Nothing wrong with that. And it also may have a different head size, a 98 versus a 100 and so forth. And a little bit off topic here, Polytour Pro has quite a unique feel to it when you're stringing it. It's quite coily. It feels actually quite slick, sort of like that ultra snapback style slickness. Obviously, it's known that Polytour Pro doesn't have a lot of great tension maintenance, but I'll find that out for myself. But anyway, coming back to the rackets and how you might market them and how you might design them better and manufacture them better. If this is a head gravity, like I said, I think it should have the same beam thickness and the same shape. But what about, instead of having Pro, MP, and so forth, what if you just had head gravity 98 or head gravity 100? So let's say you're a manufacturer and you want to have both head sizes. Nothing wrong with that. 98s are typically better for one-handed backhands. 100s typically better for two-handed backhands. So maybe you have a head gravity 98 and a head gravity 100. Great. So you have two different sizes. But then there's some more variables. The variables would be string pattern. So what if it's a head gravity 98 and then either dense or open string pattern? So a head gravity 98 open, or head gravity 98 dense. Or instead of those two terms, maybe we could use control for the denser string patterns and spin for the open string patterns. So you'd have head gravity 98, spin if it's a 1619, or control if it's an 1820. So you're using these words to define how the racket is meant to play. And then there's the most important piece in my mind, and it's getting rid of the static weight as a consideration. So I also want to see, and this is sort of the biggest problem I think in terms of designing rackets, is swing weight and static weight. Typically when you have a racket that's lighter, so any of the light versions like this MPL, or if you get a Wilson blade light, or any of the other light versions from the other manufacturers, these rackets tend to be head heavier, meaning they're balanced more towards the head or less head light than the heavier rackets, which is a little bit weird, right? So you typically, if you get the pro versions, as they're calling them today, they have a lot of weight in the handle and they have less weight in the head, so that the heaviest rackets feel the most comfortable because they're head light. They're more head light in terms of balance than the lighter rackets, where the lighter rackets are always much less headlight. Let's say 2 points headlight, 1 point headlight, 0 points headlight. It's almost directly even. Where the really heavy rackets, the 330 gram rackets or the heavier rackets, can be as much as 8, 9, 10 points headlights, which is more comfortable to swing. So I think they're making a big mistake in terms of how they're weighing these rackets, or not weighing, and how they're marketing the weights. So instead, I want to see swing weights labeled. So if you have a Head Gravity 98 spin, open pattern, 98 head front, 98 head size. Now what? Now just why don't you have, because you have the same mold already, so it's just weights. So why not have 3 variations, maybe 4 variations of swing weight? So you have the Head Gravity 98 spin 300, and the 300 designates swing weight. And then the next swing weight could be 315. So it'd be a Head Gravity 98 spin, 315 swing weight. And that would have the swing weight. Or you'd have a Head Gravity 98 spin, 330. So you'd have, in this example, you'd have 3 different variations of the Head Gravity 98 spin, all using the same exact mold, and you're just drilling different holes for the string pattern, but you also then have to determine the swing weights. So in that example, you have a 300 swing weight version, a 315 swing weight version, and a 330 swing weight version. Pretty cool in my mind. So that would tell people, hey, I know I like to use 300 gram swing weight or 315 or 330, and the racket manufacturer makes all 3 versions of the same racket. Now, I understand there's some quality control issues, and I'll come to that in a moment. But in my mind, what do you think? That's sort of, in my mind, would be the best naming convention for rackets. And in some ways, I think it would make it easier for racket manufacturers so they don't have to change the different molds as much. Maybe it's a little less hassle. I could be wrong about that. Maybe it's more of a hassle. Now, we all know, though, quality control at racket manufacturers is challenged, let's say that. And when it comes to swing weight, it's even more challenged, because depending on where the weight is placed on a racket in the layup, you might get some rackets that have a lot higher swing weight, even though the racket's generally light. So what I'd like to see, even though I'd like to see swing weights measured, I also want to see all these rackets more head light. So no matter the weight of the racket, the full weight of the racket, whether it's the 300 swing weight version, the 315 swing weight version, or the 330, I believe they all should be pretty significantly head light. Let's say at least 4 to 6 points head light, with some variation in the balance points, but it doesn't have to be dramatic. But I certainly don't want to see the 300 swing weight racket be evenly balanced. Not at all. That still should be very head light. Maybe the 330 versions would be more head light, and so forth. Again, I know this is sort of just my wishful thinking, because we still have to talk about quality control. Now, there's also another aspect to this. Because I'm such a big advocate of knowing your swing weight, if you have just 300, 315, and 330, there's still a lot of variation there. And this is sort of the holy grail of where I think some racket manufacturers, or all of them, should really think about doing something different. And that's allowing for customization. So if you bought a racket that has a 315 swing weight, so the Head Gravity 98 spin, 315 for swing weight, why not give a guide when you're selling that racket that allows someone to customize their racket? Most people already know you can add lead tape to the head. So you can have a guide, just a paper guide, or it could be online, that shows if you add 4 inches of lead tape to the 3 and 9 o'clock position, it's going to increase your swing weight by X amount of points. So if you have a 315 swing weight and you want to customize it to 325, you'll have to add 10 points of swing weight, and they can sell the lead tape as an aftermarket piece so that you can change your swing weight to 315. And they could also do the same thing, since many of the manufacturers have trap doors and you want to add weight to the handle, so maybe you want to change the balance point. So I think balance points and swing weights on rackets would be really cool. And so if you bought a 315 gram racket or 315 swing weight racket, allow people to customize it and sell them the tack in maybe little 1 ounce chunks to allow them to experiment. So in that case, so whether you buy a 315, a 330, or a 300 variation of the Head Gravity 98 spin, you could customize it to your liking. And it would be much easier to explain to the consumer how to do that. That's my thoughts on the matter. What do you think about that naming convention, or the flow of how you label a racket and so forth? Maybe there's better ways to name it, but I just want to see a head gravity, and again, also on, say, a head gravity or a speed or a blade or whatever it might be. You don't have to change the flexness, the flex ratings in these rackets either. So if you have a head gravity, it has the same head shape, it has the same head size with 2 different variations, it has the same beam thickness, and it should always have the same flex rating as well, meaning the RA rating. Why are they changing it? So if you get a Pro, it has 1 flex rating. If you get an MP, it has a different flex rating. To me, it doesn't make sense. I think a certain model line of rackets should have a couple of core, let's say 4 or 5 core attributes that define that range or those models of rackets. And then, if you want to make something that's a stiffer range, they can make a different model out of it, right? Instead, if you're going to make it a different beam thickness, or you're going to make it a different stiffness, or a different head shape, something of that nature, then do it in that manner instead. So now the big question, as I'm finishing up here, becomes, why don't they do it? And I could really only think of 2 reasons. One is just culturally. It's not the way racket manufacturers have been designed, produced, and marketed. They've been designed as 300 gram rackets or 315 gram rackets in terms of static weight and carry weight. And that's just the way it's always been done. And no one's really challenged the status quo. And no racket manufacturer has really tried to take a leap, let's say, to do something differently. That could be one reason. But I think more likely the problem is scaling and mass production of rackets and quality control. It's hard enough for these manufacturers to do the quality control for static or carry weight alone. Never mind swing weight, which I think is a much steeper hurdle. Swing weight can be affected much quickly. Swing weight can be affected. Well, I just think it's harder. It's going to be harder for the manufacturers when they're making their molds and doing their layups to really be precise with their swing weights. But if they could reduce it to a certain margin, say a 300 swing weight racket is really just 302 or 298, and it's printed on the racket, I think that would be okay. Not great. It would be better for it to be exact. But I've done some research on the topic. It's really about time and money. Maybe it would make the rackets get more expensive. That's probably the case because more QC makes the rackets more expensive and there might be more waste. And that's, of course, an issue. And I won't discount it. So maybe it's the bean counters, maybe it's the business side of the racket manufacturers and so forth. But that's kind of it for me. I mean, I think racket manufacturers, in an ideal world, I think they're producing, designing, and marketing their rackets in not the best way possible. Now, some of you might say, you're not an engineer, you don't know what you're talking about. That's partially true. I'm not a racket engineer, no doubt. I've been in tennis a long time. I've never been involved in engineering, but I am a digital engineer. I've produced a lot of digital products from the product side and the coding side, and I have an engineer mind. I design, I fabricate things in my garage. So I'm certainly consider myself to have an engineering mind. And at the end of the day, is that what makes you an engineer? Maybe. So that's it for today's video. I hope I wasn't rambling on too much. If you like these videos, let me know. I can knock out 2 things at once while I'm stringing and talking about a certain subject matter, but maybe I'm rambling too much. You can let me know in the comments. Let me know your thoughts on, do you think it's a better way in terms of ideology or conceptually? Is it a better way to produce tennis rackets and the naming convention in that manner? So that's it for today's video. If you like these videos, I work really hard on trying to grow my YouTube channel, and it is a slog, as any tennis creator will tell you. It's a slog to grow your audience. So if you like these videos, I really appreciate if you like and subscribe, and do the same thing for your other favorite tennis creators. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment on their videos. It's helpful to the entire tennis creator world that I'm trying to become a little bit a part of. And that's it for today's video, and I'll see you in the next days.